My son screamed at me not to argue in his wife's house, but I ended up winning $6 million in an unexpected lawsuit. And even today, when I remember it, I feel as if my heart was ripped out with bare hands. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you, for just a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Helen Miller. I'm 64 years old, and I live in a quiet, historic neighborhood in San Antonio, Texas. For 38 years, my world revolved around my son, Ryan. Today, I realize that might have been my first mistake. It was a gray Tuesday in November when everything changed. I remember the smell of fresh tortillas warming up on my neighbor's stove, the distant jingle of an ice cream truck making its way down the block, and there I was, in my small kitchen with its blue tiles, preparing Ryan's favorite meal, slow-smoked brisket, the kind that took me 4 hours to do just right, rubbing every spice into the meat by hand, a recipe my own mother taught me. I was wearing my yellow floral apron, the one Ryan used to say made me look like the prettiest mom in the world when he was a boy. My hands, wrinkled but firm, tended to the meat while I hummed along to a Willie Nelson song playing on the old radio on the shelf. It was my Tuesday routine. Cook for him, do his laundry, tidy up his room, which I still kept just as it was when he was 15, with his dusty high school football trophies and the photos of the two of us on the San Antonio River walk when I'd take him on the river barges. My house, a modest 2-story home with a stucco facade painted a soft desert rose, had been my sanctuary and my prison all these years. The walls were covered in photographs. Ryan at his first communion, Ryan at his high school graduation, Ryan the day he introduced me to Jessica, that woman with the sleek hair and perfect manicure who, from the very first moment, looked at me as if I were a roach in her kitchen. The phone rang just as I was serving the brisket onto the good china I'd inherited from my grandmother. It was Ryan. "Mom, I'm not coming for dinner today," he said with that cold tone he'd developed since marrying Jessica. "Jessica says it's time you learn not to expect me every Tuesday." I felt like I'd been slapped. For 8 years, ever since he got married, we had kept that tradition. It was the only piece of my son I had left. Those 2 hours on a Tuesday where he'd tell me about his job at the construction firm, where I could take care of him like I did when he was little. "But Ryan, I have everything ready. Your favorite brisket, the one that—" "I'm not a kid anymore, Mom. I'm 35 and I have a wife. You can't keep acting like I'm your baby." His words pierced me like knives. I looked at the 2 plates served on the wooden table my late husband had made with his own hands, the hand-embroidered tablecloth I'd spent months finishing, the cloth napkins I'd ironed just for him. "It's okay, son," I managed to say, though my voice broke. "I understand." I hung up the phone and stood there in that kitchen that smelled of spice and smoked wood, surrounded by a labor of love that no one was coming to receive. For the first time in years, I ate alone. The brisket tasted like ash, as if my tears had seasoned the meat. That night, as I washed the dishes in the sink, looking out at the small backyard where the flowers I planted every spring hoping Ryan would see them still grew, a text message came through. It was from Jessica, from my son's phone. "Helen, it's time for you to understand that Ryan isn't yours anymore. He has a new family. Stop being so clingy." I read the message 3 times, feeling each word burn inside me. The phone trembled in my sweaty hands as I tried to process what I was reading. Clingy? For wanting to see my only son once a week? I sat in my wicker rocking chair, the one that had belonged to my mother, and for the first time in a long time, I let the memories flood in completely. I remembered when Ryan was 5 and came down with pneumonia. I spent entire nights awake, putting cool cloths on his forehead, giving him spoonfuls of cough syrup, singing to him until he fell asleep. I remembered when he was 12 and the kids at school made fun of him for his worn-out shoes. I worked double shifts at the sewing factory to buy him new ones, even if it meant I kept wearing my own with holes in them until the next year. I remembered when his father died of a heart attack when Ryan was 17, how I clung to him as if he were the only thing I had left in the world, because he truly was. How I worked as a seamstress, a cleaning lady, whatever it took for him to finish his education. How I sold the few pieces of jewelry I owned to help pay for his college. And now, after giving him my entire life, His wife was telling me I was clingy for wanting to see him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just stared at my bedroom ceiling, listening to the neighborhood's night sounds. Dogs barking in the distance, the hum of a car passing on the street, the distant whistle of the freight train that crossed the city. And in that heavy silence of the early morning, I realized something that terrified me more than the loneliness. Maybe Jessica was right. Maybe I had been too dependent on my son. Maybe I had made him the center of my universe in a way that wasn't healthy. But the question that tortured me was, what now? What does a 64-year-old woman do when she realizes that the one thing that gave her life meaning no longer wants her around? At 5 a.m, as I made my coffee in the silent kitchen, I looked out the window at the house across the street where Mrs. Gable, a 72-year-old widow who always greeted me with a smile, lived. I wondered if she ever felt as empty as I did, if she also woke up each day not knowing exactly what for. Over the next few weeks, I tried to behave as Jessica wanted. I stopped calling Ryan every day. I stopped asking if he'd eaten well or if he needed me to do his laundry. I stopped being clingy. But every day that passed without talking to him felt like pieces of my soul were being torn away. One afternoon in December, while sweeping dry leaves in the small backyard, I found a shoebox I'd forgotten under the patio table. When I opened it, my hand shook. It was filled with receipts, bills, and documents that told the story of a lifetime dedicated to my son. There was the orthodontist's bill from when Ryan was 8 and needed braces. $200, which back then was my entire weekly salary. I remembered eating nothing but toast and beans for 6 months to make those payments. Ryan never knew his mother stayed up until 3 a.m. sewing school uniforms for other families, just so he could have perfect teeth. There was also the copy of the loan I co-signed when he was 18 and wanted to go to Texas A&M. $50,000 that took me 10 years to help him pay off, working 3 different jobs. While he was studying, I'd come home with my feet swollen from standing all day at the factory, but I always had a hot dinner ready for him and his uniform ironed for the next day. I found the receipts from the graduation trip he took to South Padre Island with his friends. $3,000 that I got by selling my mother's wedding ring, the only valuable piece of jewelry I had left. Ryan had told me, "Mom, all my friends are going. I can't be the only one who stays behind." And I, as always, found a way to make him happy, even if it meant getting rid of something irreplaceable. But what hurt the most was finding the letter I had written for the bank when Ryan and Jessica bought their house. A letter where I, a 60-year-old woman living on Social Security, became the co-signer for a $200,000 mortgage. I signed those papers without hesitation, putting my own home, my only asset, at risk because my son told me that without my signature, he couldn't be happy with his wife. "Mom, you understand how important this is for us," Ryan had said that day, while Jessica waited in the car without even getting out to greet me. "It's our chance to get a good start." And I signed. I signed because I thought I was investing in my son's happiness, that I was securing a future where he would remember me with love and gratitude. 2 years after that signature, Jessica stopped speaking to me completely. If I called and she answered, she'd simply hang up. If I ran into her at the H-E-B down the street, she'd turn her head as if I were invisible. And Ryan, my Ryan, never said a word to defend me. As I read those documents sitting on the floor of my yard, with the dry leaves crunching under my legs, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. There was a pattern. Every time Ryan needed something important, he would show up at my house with that smile I knew since he was a baby. The one he knew melted my heart. "Mom, I need to ask you for a favor," he had said just 6 months ago, sitting at the same table where we used to eat his favorite brisket. "The company is going through a rough patch and I need to borrow $5,000 so I don't lose my job. $5,000 that I took from the money I had saved to fix my roof, which leaked every time it rained. All through the rainy season, I placed buckets and rags on my bedroom floor, listening to the constant dripping that reminded me I had chosen my son's well-being over my own. Ryan promised to pay me back in 3 months. 6 had passed, and not only had he not paid back a single dollar, but now he was treating me like I was a nuisance in his life. That night, I called my best friend Sharon, the only person who knew me from before Ryan was even born. I told her everything while she made chamomile tea in her kitchen that smelled of cinnamon and vanilla. "Helen, honey," she said in that raspy voice she'd had since she started smoking 2 packs a day, "that son of yours is using you, and you're letting him." Her words hit me like cold water. Sharon had always been direct, but she'd never spoken ill of Ryan. "Don't say that, Sharon. He's my son. That's precisely why I'm telling you. I saw how you sacrificed everything after your husband died. How you worked yourself sick so that boy would never feel like he was missing anything. And now, how does he repay you? By leaving you to eat alone on Tuesdays because his little princess doesn't want you around?" I stayed quiet, stirring my tea with a small spoon that tinkled against the ceramic mug. The silence in Sharon's kitchen was heavy, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock and the distant sound of a sitcom from the neighbor's TV. "You know what hurts the most, Sharon?" I finally said, feeling the tears burn my eyes. "I raised a good man. I taught him to respect women, to value his family, to be grateful. And now I don't recognize the man he's become." Sharon came over and took my hands. Her fingers, rough from years of work, squeezed mine tightly. "The problem, Helen, is that you taught him how to take, but you never taught him how to give. You gave him so much that now he thinks it's his right. And that woman he married saw that and is using it against you." That night, I walked back to my house through the familiar neighborhood streets, passing houses where families were having dinner together, where laughter and conversations could be heard through the lit-up windows. I stopped in front of the house where Ryan had grown up, where we had been happy when it was just him and me against the world. I looked up at the window of his old bedroom, now my sewing room, where I still kept some of his toys in a box. I wondered at what exact moment I had lost my son. Was it when he got married? Was it when he met Jessica? Or had it been much earlier, when I started giving him everything without asking for anything in return? When I got home, I poured myself a glass of water and sat in the living room. On the mantel was his wedding photo, where I was smiling next to him, while Jessica completely ignored me, even on her own special day. I remembered how uncomfortable I had felt that day, as if I were in the way at my own son's celebration. I picked up my phone and dialed his number. It rang 5 times before he answered. "What is it, Mom? It's late. Ryan, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." I heard a sigh on the other end of the line. "Do you love me?" There was a long silence. So long that for a moment I thought he had hung up. "Of course I love you, Mom." "You're my mother. Then why do I feel like I'm a burden in your life?" "Don't say that. It's just, Jessica thinks you're a little too intense, that you don't let me be independent." There it was, the truth I had been avoiding. My daughter-in-law controlled what my son thought of me, and he allowed it. After that phone call, something inside me changed. It was as if I had woken up from a very long and confusing dream. The following days were a roller coaster of emotions I didn't know how to handle. My 65th birthday arrived in January, a gray and cold day that dawned with that typical Texas drizzle that makes everything look sadder than usual. I got up early, as always, made my coffee in the same chipped mug I'd used for years, and sat down to wait. I waited for Ryan's call, waited for him to show up at my door with flowers, waited for something to tell me I was still important in his life. The hours passed slowly. I watched through the window as neighbors left for work, as kids went to school with their colorful backpacks, as life went on as normal while I just sat there, in my rocking chair, waiting for a call that never came. At 2 in the afternoon, when I had lost all hope, the phone rang. My heart raced so fast I thought I was going to have a heart attack. "Hello? Mrs. Miller? This is Ryan." It was my son's voice, but it sounded strange, as if he were reading from a script. "I'm calling to wish you a happy birthday. I'm calling. Mrs. Miller," as if I were a stranger, as if I weren't the woman who had given birth to him, who had raised him, who had given her entire life for him. "Thank you, son," I managed to say, though my voice trembled. "Are you coming to see me?" "I can't, Mom. Jessica organized a dinner with her parents, and I can't miss it." Of course. Jessica's parents, who had money, who lived in a gated community, who never worked double shifts to pay for anyone's education. They were more important than me on my own birthday. "I understand," I lied. "Have a good time." "Mom, wait. Jessica wants to talk to you." Before I could say anything, I heard my daughter-in-law's cold voice. "Helen, Ryan asked me to tell you something important." Her tone was the same one she would use to give orders to a cleaning lady. "We need you to understand that you can no longer depend on him so much. You need to get your own life. It's time for you to grow up." Grow up? Me, who had grown up at 17 when my mother died. Me, who had grown up when I was widowed at 45. Me, who had worked until my hands bled so her husband could go to college. She was telling me I needed to grow up. "And another thing," Jessica continued, not giving me time to respond. "Ryan won't be able to lend you any more money. We have expenses and he's already done too much for you." Too much for me. The words bounced around in my head like ping-pong balls. Too much? The $5,000 he never paid back was too much? Allowing me to risk my house to co-sign his mortgage was too much? "Jessica," I managed to say, with a voice I didn't recognize as my own. "It's my birthday. I know. That's why I'm being clear with you. It's a good day to start a new chapter in your life. A more mature one." She hung up. Just like that. On my birthday, she hung up on me after humiliating me in the cruelest way possible. I stood there, phone in hand, listening to the dial tone that sounded like an ambulance siren in my ears. For the first time in my life, I felt something I had never felt before. Hatred. Pure hatred for that woman who had poisoned my son, who had turned my loving boy into a stranger who treated me like a burden. That night I couldn't sleep. I spent it walking around the house, looking at the photos of Ryan on the walls, remembering every happy moment we had lived together. There was a photo of him when he was 5, hugging me after I defended him from some kids who were making fun of him at the park. "You're the best mom in the world," he had told me that day. "You'll always be my queen." Where was that boy? When did he become the man who let his wife humiliate me on my birthday? 3 days later, the electricity bill arrived. $230 that I didn't have. Ever since I had lent that $5,000 to Ryan, my finances had been tight. My Social Security check barely covered the basics, and without the small amount of rent he used to give me when he lived with me, everything had become more difficult. I decided to call him. After all, he had promised to pay me back. "Ryan, I need you to help me with something urgent." "What is it now, Mom?" His tone was annoyed, as if he were already tired of the conversation before it even began. "I need you to pay me back at least part of the money I lent you. I have to pay the electric bill and—" "Mom, Jessica already told you I can't be lending you money. You need to learn to manage your money better. Manage my money better. On a pension of $400 a month. Manage my money better after I had given him everything. Ryan, it's not a loan. It's my money that you promised to pay back. Look, Mom, I'm not going to argue with you. If you're having money problems, get a job. There are plenty of women your age who work as housekeepers." A housekeeper. My son, whom I had raised to be a professional, for whom I had paid for college, was suggesting I become a housekeeper while he lived in his $200,000 house that I had co-signed for. Are you serious right now? I'm telling you the reality, Mom. You're not my responsibility anymore. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I was no longer his responsibility. But when he needed money, when he needed a co-signer, when he needed me to bail him out, then I was his useful mother. "All right," I said with a calm that surprised me. "You're right. I'm not your responsibility anymore." And I hung up. I sat in the kitchen and cried like I hadn't cried since the day my husband died. But these tears were different. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. Rage at myself for being so blind. Rage at Ryan for becoming someone I didn't recognize. Rage at Jessica for destroying my family. The next day, while I was washing dishes, my favorite mug slipped from my hands. It was a blue mug with flowers that Ryan had given me for Mother's Day when he was 10. It shattered on the kitchen floor. As I picked up the pieces, one of them cut my finger. Drops of blood fell onto the broken bits of porcelain. It was in that moment, seeing my blood mixed with the remains of that gift of love, that something inside me broke for good, but it was also when something new began to be born. That afternoon, I went to the bank. For the first time in years, I reviewed all my statements. I calculated exactly how much money I had given Ryan over the years. The figure took my breath away. Over $30,000 in loans, gifts, payments, and co-signed debts. $30,000 that a retired woman had sacrificed for a son who now treated her like an annoying stranger. I left the bank with a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't rage. It was something new. Something that took me days to recognize. It was determination. For the first time in her life, Helen Miller was going to put her own needs before her son's. And Ryan had no idea what was coming. The determination that had been born in me didn't go unnoticed for long. 2 weeks after my humiliating birthday, when I had already decided that things were going to change, Ryan showed up at my door on a Sunday morning. I saw him arrive from my living room window. He was alone, without Jessica, walking down the street with that posture I knew so well, shoulders slumped, hands in his pockets, gaze fixed on the ground. It was the same posture he had as a child when he knew he'd done something wrong and was coming to apologize. He rang the doorbell 3 times before I opened it. When I saw him standing there, in the frame of the door he had crossed thousands of times when this house was his home, I felt a pang in my chest. He was still my son, the boy I had held in my arms, but now there was something different in his eyes. Something it took me a moment to recognize. Fear. "Hi, Mom," he said, trying to smile. "Can I come in?" I let him in without a word. He automatically went to the kitchen, as he always had, and sat in the same chair where he ate breakfast as a teenager. I stood by the stove, not offering him anything to drink, not asking if he was hungry, not doing any of the things I had done automatically for 35 years. "Mom," he began, fiddling with the salt shaker on the table. "I came because I realized things aren't right between us." I waited. I said nothing. I just looked at him with that look mothers develop when their children try to manipulate them, the one that says, "I know exactly what you're doing. I know Jessica can be direct sometimes, but she's not a bad person, Mom. She's just protecting our relationship." "Protecting your relationship from what, Ryan?" I asked, my voice colder than I had planned. "From me?" He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "It's not that, Mom. It's just, well, sometimes you can be a little intense." There it was again. Intense. Clingy. All the words Jessica had used to describe a mother who loved her son. Intense how? Well, calling me every day, expecting me to come for dinner every Tuesday, asking about my personal life. Each accusation was like a slap. Calling him every day when for years he had called me. Expecting him to come for dinner when it was a tradition he himself had started. Asking about his personal life when it was what any mother would do. "I see," I said, maintaining a calm that surprised even me. "So what do you propose?" His face lit up as if a great weight had just been lifted from his shoulders. "That we have clearer boundaries. That we see each other once a month, maybe. That you don't call me unless it's a real emergency. That you respect my marriage and my space." Once a month. The son I had given my life for was rationing me out like bitter medicine. "And the money?" I asked. His expression changed instantly. The fear returned to his eyes. "What money?" "The $5,000 you promised to pay back in 3 months. It's been 6 months, Ryan." "Mom, we already talked about this. I can't be lending you money right now. I'm not asking you for a loan. I'm asking you to pay back my money." He stood up, walked to the window overlooking the yard where he had played as a child, where he learned to ride a bike, where he had cried when his father died. "The problem, Mom, is that you always see everything as a transaction, like you're keeping a running tab of everything you've ever done for me." His words hit me like a physical blow. A transaction? After sacrificing my entire life for him, he was accusing me of seeing it as a transaction? "I don't keep a tab on my love, Ryan. I keep a tab on my savings that I lent you and that I need back. You just don't get it, do you?" He turned to face me with an expression I had never seen on him. It was contempt. My own son was looking at me with contempt. "Everything you did for me, you did because you wanted to. Nobody forced you. And now you act like I owe you something for it." The silence that followed was deafening. The kitchen clock ticked off the seconds, sounding like drops of water in a puddle. Outside, I could hear the normal Sundays of normal families, children playing, music, laughter. "You're right," I said finally. "Nobody forced me." His face relaxed, thinking he had won. "Nobody forced me to work 3 jobs to pay for your college." Nobody forced me to sell my mother's jewelry for your graduation trip. Nobody forced me to put my house at risk to co-sign your mortgage. I did it because I loved you. But you're right about one thing. You don't owe me anything for my love. I paused, looking him in the eyes. But you do owe me $5,000 that you borrowed from me. Mom, no. My voice was louder than I'd intended. The time for mom is over. For 35 years, every time you had a problem, you came running to me. Every time you needed money, I found a way to give it to you. Every time you messed up, I bailed you out. And now that you have a nice house, a stable job, and a wife who hates me, you decide you don't need me anymore. He approached me with that look he used as a child when he wanted to convince me of something. Mom, it's not like that. It's just that Jessica thinks— I don't care what Jessica thinks, I yelled for the first time in my life. Jessica is not your mother. Jessica didn't sell everything she owned so you could have a better life. Jessica didn't work herself sick so you would never feel like you were missing anything. Ryan stood there in silence, his eyes wide. He had never seen me explode like that. You know what hurts the most? I continued, feeling years of pent-up frustration erupt from my throat like lava from a volcano. I raised a good man. I taught you to value women, to respect your family, to be grateful. And that woman you married destroyed it all in 2 years. Don't talk about Jessica like that. And there it was, the naked truth, my son defending the woman who had humiliated me, who had poisoned our relationship, who had made me an enemy in my own family. Leave, I said with a calm that surprised me. What? I said leave my house, and don't come back until you have my $5,000 or until you can treat me with the respect the woman who gave you life deserves. Ryan looked at me as if he didn't recognize me. Maybe he was right. Maybe the Helen he knew, the one who always gave in, who always forgave, who always gave without receiving, had died the moment that blue floral mug shattered. Mom, you're overreacting. You can't be mad at me forever. You know what? You're right. I'm not going to be mad forever. I walked to the door and opened it. I'm going to be disappointed forever. That's worse. He stood in the middle of my kitchen, his mouth open, as if he'd just seen a ghost. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. He walked out of my house slowly, looking back several times as if he expected me to run after him, to yell for him to come back, to apologize for telling him the truth, but I didn't. I stood in my doorway, watching him walk away down the street until he turned the corner and disappeared. I closed the door, leaned against it, and for the first time in months, I smiled. An hour later, the bombardment began. First came the text messages. Mom, I think you misunderstood what I was trying to say. I didn't mean to hurt you. We can talk when you've cooled down. Then calls I didn't answer. Then a voicemail where he was crying like he did as a child when he broke something valuable. Mom, please pick up. You know I love you. We just need to find a way for us all to get along. Us all. Including Jessica in the equation of our mother-son relationship. That night, for the first time in years, I ate dinner in my living room watching TV, my feet up on the coffee table, eating straight from the skillet. There was no one to impress, no one whose approval I needed, no one for whom I had to be the perfect mother. It was strange, but it was also liberating, and something told me this was just the beginning. I woke up on Monday for the first time in years without that heavy feeling in my chest that had accompanied me since I opened my eyes. There were no unread messages from Ryan asking what I had for breakfast. No need to think about what to cook for his dinner. No need to plan my day around his needs. I got up at 8 in the morning, an hour later than usual, and instead of rushing to do chores, I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat on my patio to watch the sun light up the bougainvillea I had planted years ago. The purple flowers glowed with the morning dew, and for the first time, I noticed how beautiful they were. When was the last time I had simply sat and enjoyed my garden? When was the last time I did something just for the pleasure of it? At 10, the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Helen Miller? Yes, this is she. This is National Bank. I understand you are a co-signer on a mortgage loan for Mr. Ryan Miller and Mrs. Jessica Miller. My blood ran cold. What had happened with the mortgage I had co-signed? Yes, that's correct. Ma'am, we haven't received a payment in 3 months. The loan is in default. And as you are the co-signer, We need you to come to our offices as soon as possible to review payment options. 3 months. 3 months without paying the mortgage. Right around the time Ryan had borrowed that $5,000 from me to save his job. It was all starting to make sense. How much do they owe? The total amount due, including late fees and interest, is $18,000. $18,000. An amount that was more than my entire annual income from Social Security. And if it's not paid? As you are the co-signer, your property is listed as collateral. In the event the debt is not settled, we may proceed with foreclosure on your home. My house. The house where I had raised Ryan, where I had built all my memories, where I planned to live until the end of my days. All because I co-signed for a son who now treated me like an annoying stranger. I understand. Can I come to your offices tomorrow? Of course, ma'am. We'll expect you at 10 a.m. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen, processing the information. Ryan had not only lied to me about what he needed the money for, but he had been gambling with my home for months without saying a word. It was Tuesday. Brisket, Tuesday. For the first time in 8 years, there wasn't a hint of brisket cooking on my stove. Instead, I made myself a ham sandwich and ate it standing in the kitchen, looking out the window at the street where neighbors went about their normal lives. Mrs. Gable, my neighbor from across the street, came to her fence when she saw me in the window. "Helen, how are you, dear?" I went out to talk to her. Mrs. Gable was 72, a widow for 10 years, and had always been the kind of neighbor you wave to but never have a deep conversation with. I had always been too busy taking care of Ryan. "I'm hanging in there, Mrs. Gable. How are you?" "Good, good. Say, I haven't seen Ryan around here in a while. Is he okay?" For a moment, I hesitated. For 35 years, my automatic response had been to defend my son, to sing his praises, to boast about his accomplishments. But this time, the words that came out of my mouth surprised even me. "Ryan and I are taking a break. We need some space." Mrs. Gable looked at me with those wise eyes that women who have lived a long life have. "Oh, honey. Sometimes children need us to teach them that we won't be around forever." Her words rang in my chest like bells. We won't be around forever. How long had I lived as if my only purpose in life was to be available for Ryan whenever he needed me? "Mrs. Gable, can I ask you something?" "Of course, dear. How did you do it when your children left? How did you get used to living alone?" She laughed, the kind of laugh from a woman who has found peace after the storm. "You know what I discovered? That I had forgotten who Helen was when she wasn't being Mom. You have to get to know yourself all over again." That afternoon, I went to the bank. The office was filled with people with worried faces, families who probably had problems similar to mine. When it was my turn, the loan officer explained the situation with technical terms that translated into a very simple reality. My son had betrayed me. "Do you have a way of contacting the primary borrowers?" the man asked. A man in his 40s with the face of someone who had seen many stories like mine. "He's my son," I said. And for the first time, those words sounded strange in my mouth. "I see. Look, ma'am, I've seen many cases like this. Parents who co-sign for their children and end up losing everything. My advice is to protect yourself first. What are my options? You can demand that they settle the debt, you can pay it yourself to save your property, or you can initiate legal proceedings to be released from the co-signer agreement due to lack of information." Legal proceedings. Against my own son. "How long do I have to decide?" 1 month at most, ma'am. After that, we will begin foreclosure proceedings." I left the bank with a strange feeling. It wasn't fear, though it should have been. It was something like clarity. For the first time in my life, I was seeing the situation without the filter of motherly love that had always made me justify everything Ryan did. Instead of going straight home, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went downtown to walk by myself. I passed the historic market, the plaza where mariachis played for tourists, the familiar streets I had known since I was a child. I sat on a bench in front of the San Fernando Cathedral, the same one where I had Ryan baptized 35 years ago. I remembered that day. I was so young, so full of hope, holding that baby who had become the center of my universe. At what point had I stopped being Helen and become solely Ryan's mom? An older gentleman sat on the bench next to me. He had to be over 70, but he looked calm. at peace with himself. "Good afternoon," he said with a kind smile. "Good afternoon. Do you come here often?" "I used to when I was a girl. It's been a long time since I came alone." "And how does it feel to be here alone?" The question took me by surprise. How did I feel? Strange, I admitted, but also free. He nodded as if he understood perfectly. "You know, ma'am, sometimes we need to be alone to remember who we are when no one else is watching." That night, instead of cooking a full dinner as I had for decades, I made myself some quesadillas and ate them while watching a soap opera I had started weeks ago but had never been able to follow because I was always busy with Ryan's needs. At 9 o'clock, the phone rang. It was him, of course. "Mom, we need to talk." "About what, Ryan?" "About the bank. They called me. They said you went to ask about the mortgage." So he knew that I knew. Interesting. Yes, I did. "They told me something very interesting about 3 months of missed payments." There was a long silence. "Mom, I can explain." "I don't need you to explain anything, Ryan. I need you to pay me back my $5,000 and get current on the mortgage that I co-signed for you." "It's not that easy, Mom. We're going through a tough time. Then sell the house." "What?" "The house. Sell it. Pay what you owe and find something you can afford, like all responsible people do." "Mom, that's our home. You can't ask me to sell it. It's your home that I co-signed for and which is putting my home at risk. But if we all help pay it off..." "No." My voice sounded firmer than I had expected. "The time for us all helping is over. The time for my problems being everyone's but your problems being only yours is over. Mom, you have 1 month, Ryan. 1 month to fix this. After that, everyone is responsible for their own life." I hung up and turned off my phone. For the first time in years, I slept a full 8 hours. The month I had given Ryan flew by, and every day that passed without a word from him confirmed what I already knew deep down. He wasn't going to do it. On the last day of the deadline, a Friday afternoon, I decided it was time to take control of my own life. I went to see Mr. Martinez, a lawyer Mrs. Gable had recommended. His office was downtown, in an old but well-kept building with marble stairs that creaked under my shoes as I climbed to the second floor. The lawyer was a man in his 60s, with gray hair and kind but firm eyes. He received me in an office full of books and offered me coffee while he reviewed the documents I had brought. "Mrs. Miller," he said after studying everything for an hour, "you have a very strong case to be released from this co-signer agreement. Your son failed to inform you that he was going to stop making payments. He did not communicate his true financial situation, and he essentially deceived you into using your assets as collateral. What does that mean exactly?" "It means we can start legal proceedings to free you from any liability for that mortgage. They will have to face the consequences of their financial decisions without involving your property." I felt enormous relief, but also a deep sadness. I was about to sue my own son. How long would the process take? Between 6 and 8 months, depending on whether they decide to settle or fight it to the end. That night, I called Ryan one last time. "Mom, I'm glad you called. I wanted to talk to you about..." "Ryan," I interrupted. "Tomorrow at 10 in the morning, I will be at your house. I am coming to have a final conversation with you and Jessica about this issue." "A conversation about what?" "About the $5,000 you owe me, about the mortgage that is in default, and about the future of our relationship." "Mom, I don't think that's a good idea. Jessica has been really stressed lately and..." "I don't give a damn how Jessica is feeling," I said with a firmness that surprised even me. "This conversation is necessary and it's happening tomorrow. If you're not home, you will hear about my decisions through my lawyer." "Your lawyer?" "Yes, Ryan. Your mom has a lawyer now. How about that?" There was a long silence. "Okay, we'll be here." Saturday morning, I put on my best dress, a navy blue one I had bought for Ryan's wedding and only wore on special occasions. I did my makeup carefully, styled my hair back into an elegant bun, and put on the pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. This wasn't the submissive, always available Helen of the past 35 years. This woman stood up straight, had a firm gaze, and something in her expression screamed, "You will not walk all over me again." Ryan and Jessica's house was in an upper-middle-class subdivision. with identical houses painted in pastel colors and perfectly manicured lawns. It had cost $200,000, an amount that had seemed astronomical when I co-signed, but I had agreed because I wanted to see my son happy. I rang the doorbell at exactly 10. Ryan opened the door, looking like he hadn't slept well. Behind him, Jessica appeared and disappeared down the hallway like a ghost, clearly nervous about my presence. "Hi, Mom. Come in." The house was impeccably decorated, with expensive furniture and decorations that screamed money. In the living room was a giant flat-screen TV that cost more than 3 months of my Social Security checks, all paid for with money they didn't have. "Please, have a seat," Ryan said, gesturing to the Italian leather sofa where I had sat only once before, on the day of their housewarming party. Jessica finally decided to make an appearance. She was wearing an expensive silk robe and slippers with rhinestones. Her hair was perfectly styled despite it being a Saturday morning, and her makeup was flawless. She looked like a woman who had never worked a day in her life. "Helen," she said with that fake smile I knew so well, "what a surprise to see you here." "It's not a surprise, Jessica. Ryan knew I was coming." She sat next to my son, took his hand, and looked at me with that expression she always used, as if I were a roach that had appeared in her kitchen. "Well," I said, pulling a folder with documents from my purse, "I came to talk about money." They both tensed up immediately. "Ryan owes me $5,000 that I lent him 8 months ago. You also owe 3 months of payments on the mortgage that I co-signed, which means my house is at risk because of you." "Helen," Jessica said in that syrupy voice she used when she wanted to manipulate, "we understand your concern, but you have to understand that we are also going through a difficult time." "A difficult time?" I looked around their luxurious living room. "With a TV that costs thousands and furniture that costs more than my house? You just don't get it," Jessica continued. "We have a certain lifestyle to maintain. Ryan has an image to uphold for his job. And what about my image? The image of a 65-year-old woman who could lose her home because her son deceived her." Ryan, who had been silent, finally spoke. "Mom, I didn't mean to deceive you. Things just got more complicated than I expected. When were you planning on telling me you weren't paying the mortgage? After they had already foreclosed on my house. It wasn't going to get to that point. I was going to fix things." "With what money, Ryan? Because from what I can see, your money goes to luxuries while you owe everyone." Jessica shot up with a furious expression. "How dare you come into our house and judge how we live? You know nothing about our responsibilities." "You're right," I said, remaining seated and calm. "I know nothing about your responsibilities, but I do know about mine, and my responsibility now is to protect my assets." I pulled a copy of the complaint my lawyer had prepared from the folder. "Ryan, you have 1 week to pay me my $5,000 and get current on the mortgage. If you don't, I will proceed legally to be released from the co-signer agreement and sue you for the money you owe me." Ryan took the document with trembling hands. "Mom, you can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life." Jessica began pacing the living room like a caged lioness. "This is unbelievable! Ryan, your mother is threatening us. Are you going to let your own mother sue us?" "Jessica, calm down," Ryan said, but his voice sounded defeated. "I will not calm down. This woman comes into our house to threaten us after everything we've done for her." "Everything you've done for me?" I stood up from the sofa with a tranquility that surprised me. "Jessica, what exactly have you done for me? Ryan calls you, invites you over, worries about you. Ryan calls me when he needs money. He invites me over when he needs favors. He worries about me when it's convenient for him." "You are so ungrateful," Jessica screamed, her voice breaking. "Ryan has given you more than you deserve. You're a manipulative old woman who can't let go of her son." The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at Ryan, waiting for him to defend his mother, to say something, to set a boundary with his wife, but he said nothing. He just sat there on his Italian leather sofa, staring at the floor, while his wife insulted me to my face. "I see," I said, with a calm that empowered me. "I see exactly how things are here." I walked to the door, turned one last time, and looked Ryan straight in the eye. "Son, for 35 years, I was your refuge when the world hurt you. I was your bank when you needed money. I was your salvation when you screwed up. But never, not once, were you my defender when someone attacked me. Tears streamed down his cheeks, but he still said nothing. "You have 1 week," I repeated. "After that, you're going to find out what it feels like to be all alone in the world." I left that house knowing that something between us had died forever. But I also knew that, for the first time in my life, Helen Miller had put herself first. The week passed without a single call from Ryan. Each silent day confirmed that I had made the right decision. On Friday afternoon, when the deadline was up, I called Mr. Martinez. "Proceed with everything, Mr. Martinez. My son has decided that luxuries are more important than his mother." "Understood, Mrs. Miller. We'll file the suit on Monday." That night, for the first time in months, I sat down to dinner without the knot in my stomach that had been with me since this all began. I had made a rich beef stew, my favorite dish that I never cooked because Ryan didn't like it. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, accompanied only by the sound of the radio playing old soul music. At 9 o'clock, as I was washing the dishes, the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Gable, holding a plate covered with a cloth napkin. "Helen, dear, I brought you some peach cobbler. I thought you might appreciate something sweet these days." I invited her in, and we sat in my living room with our plates of cobbler and cups of chamomile tea. The sweet aroma filled the air in a way that reminded me of my childhood, when my mother would make me desserts to comfort me after a hard day at school. "How are you feeling?" Mrs. Gable asked, with that soft voice of women who have learned to truly listen. "Like I've woken up from a very long dream," I replied, surprised at my own honesty. "You know what's strangest? I don't feel sad. I feel like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders." Mrs. Gable nodded wisely. "That's because you've finally stopped carrying a burden that was never yours to begin with. Children grow up, Helen. And when they do, they have to learn to live with the consequences of their own choices." That night I slept deeply, and for the first time in years, I dreamed about myself. Not about Ryan, not about problems to solve, not about money to lend. I dreamed I was at a local nursery, buying bougainvillea to plant in my garden, laughing with the staff, feeling the sun on my face. On Monday morning, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I went to a hair salon. Rosie's salon was 3 blocks from my house, and I had always wanted to go but never made the time or found the money for such luxuries. Rosie was a woman my age with fiery red hair and long gold-painted nails. She greeted me as if we were lifelong friends. "What are we doing today, gorgeous?" "I want to change," I said, looking at my reflection in the mirror. "I want to look like the woman I am now, not the woman I used to be." Rosie smiled knowingly. "Oh, honey, I know exactly what you need." 3 hours later, I walked out of the salon with my hair cut in a modern bob that brushed my shoulders, colored a light brown with golden highlights that made me look 10 years younger. Rosie had also given me a manicure and taught me how to apply my makeup in a more modern way. When I saw myself in the salon's mirror, I couldn't believe it was me. The woman looking back had bright eyes, glowing skin, and something in her expression that screamed life. "You look beautiful," Rosie said as I paid. "But more importantly, you look free." Free. That word echoed in my chest as I walked home through the streets of my neighborhood. The mailman called out, "Lookin' sharp, Mrs. Miller." And for the first time in years, I didn't look down in embarrassment. I smiled right back at him. That afternoon, I decided to do something I'd wanted to do for years. Sign up for the painting classes offered at the local community arts center. I'd always had a knack for drawing, but I never had the time to develop the talent because I was too busy being the perfect mother. The teacher, Linda, was a woman in her 50s with paint-stained hands and a contagious smile. "Any prior experience?" she asked as she handed me brushes and a palette. "Only what I had as a girl. It's been about 40 years since I've touched a paintbrush." "Perfect. Then we'll just rediscover the artist you have inside." My first painting was of my backyard. I painted the purple bougainvillea I loved so much, my grandmother's old stone grinding bowl that I now used as a planter, the table where I ate breakfast every morning. As I painted, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Peace. At the end of the class, Linda came over to look at my work. "Helen, this is beautiful. You have a natural eye for color." I took my painting home and hung it in the living room, right where the largest photo of Ryan used to be. Seeing my own creation on that wall filled me with a pride I had never felt before. That night, while I was having dinner in front of my new painting, The phone rang. It was an unknown number. Mrs. Helen Miller? Yes, this is she. This is Mr. Martinez's office calling. I'm calling to inform you that we've received a call from the opposing party. They want to reach a settlement. My heart sped up. What kind of settlement? They are willing to pay you the $5,000 they owe you and bring the mortgage current so that you can be released from the co-signer agreement. I felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because they were finally going to meet their obligations. Sadness because it had to come to a lawsuit for my own son to respect me. And what do you recommend? That we accept, but with very clear conditions. A specific payment schedule, guarantees, and legal consequences if they fail to comply. Perfect. Do it. 2 days later, Ryan showed up at my door. He was alone, his eyes were red, and he had an expression I hadn't seen since he was a boy, and had broken something valuable. Mom, he said when I opened the door, we need to talk. This time, I didn't invite him in. We stood in the entryway, under the arch of bougainvillea that framed my door. What do you want to talk about, Ryan? About everything. About what happened. What I said. How we got here. I looked at him closely. He was still my son. But now I saw him with different eyes. I saw him as a grown man who had made choices and had to live with the consequences. And Jessica? Jessica is furious. She says she doesn't understand why I need to fix things with you. And what did you tell her? That you're my mother. That without you, I wouldn't exist. That I behaved like a coward for letting her treat you that way. His words touched me, but they no longer melted me like before. Ryan, we are going to fix the issue with the money and the mortgage because it's the right thing to do. But our relationship, that's going to take a long time to heal. I understand, Mom. I just want you to know that I realize everything I did wrong. Everything I put you through. I'm glad you realize it, but realizing is easy. The hard part is changing. He was quiet for a moment, fiddling with his car keys like he used to as a nervous teenager. Do you think you can ever forgive me? I've already forgiven you, son. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean going back to how things were. Then what does it mean? It means that now we are two adults who are going to have to build a new relationship. One where I am not your personal savior, and you are not the center of my universe. I saw in his eyes that he understood. For the first time in years, I saw something in my son's gaze that had been lost. Respect. Can I hug you? He asked in a small voice. I hugged him, but it was no longer the desperate embrace of a mother clinging to her son. It was the calm embrace of a woman who had found her own strength and could give love from a place of abundance, not need. When he left, I went inside and looked at myself in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back had reclaimed something she had lost a long time ago, her dignity, and that, I realized, was worth far more than the $6 million I would soon receive from the lawsuit my lawyer had also filed for emotional distress and fraudulent use of my assets. Helen Miller had been born again, and this time, no one else was going to decide how she lived her life. 6 months after that last hug with Ryan, I find myself sitting on the patio of my new house, a small but beautiful property in the King William Historic District that I bought with part of the money from the lawsuit. From here, I can see the arts and crafts market, hear the cheerful buzz of tourists, and feel like I'm part of a world that extends far beyond the 4 walls where I lived, locked in my role as a sacrificial mother. The lawsuit ended better than I ever expected. Mr. Martinez not only got them to pay back the $5,000 and release me from the mortgage, but he also successfully proved emotional distress and the fraudulent use of my assets. The jury awarded me $6 million in damages, an amount I never imagined I'd have. Ryan made all the payments, sold his luxury house, and now lives with Jessica in a more modest apartment. According to Mrs. Gable, who heard it from the woman who cleans their building, Jessica is not at all happy with the change in lifestyle. Apparently, discovering that actions have consequences doesn't sit well with my former daughter-in-law. My relationship with Ryan is now cordial but distant. We meet once a month for coffee at a neutral cafe, we talk about general topics, and we each go back to our own lives without drama or manipulation. It's strange, but it's also healthy. For the first time in 35 years, I am not responsible for his emotions, nor is he for mine. Last week he told me he's considering separating from Jessica. It seems that when the easy money and luxuries ran out, so did much of the love she claimed to feel for him. He didn't give me details, and I didn't ask for them. His marriage is no longer my problem to solve. My new house is a reflection of who I am now. The walls are filled with my paintings, landscapes of the Texas Hill Country, portraits of Mrs. Gable, still lifes with bright marigolds. Linda, my painting teacher, says I have enough work for an exhibition. The idea excites and terrifies me at the same time, but I've learned that fears are meant to be conquered, not submitted to. In the living room, there are no more photos of Ryan as a child, a teenager, or an adult. In their place is a photo of me on my 66th birthday, surrounded by my new friends from the painting workshop. All of us laughing like schoolgirls as we celebrated my life. My routine now is completely different. I wake up when my body tells me to, not when obligations demand it. I have breakfast on my patio while reading the entire newspaper, something I could never do because I was always rushing to prepare something for Ryan. Tuesdays are no longer brisket days. They're painting days. Fridays are no longer for cleaning the house where he no longer lives. They're for going to the market at La Velita to sell my paintings. Yes, I sell my paintings. I have a small booth where people stop, admire my work, and sometimes take a piece home. It's not that I need the money, but knowing that someone wants to pay for something I created with my own hands gives me a satisfaction I never felt cooking meals that no one truly appreciated. A month ago, I met Arthur, a 68-year-old widower who also sells crafts at the market. He makes small, hand-carved guitars, and he has the most skilled hands I've ever seen. We've become friends. We have coffee together after we close our booths. We talk about art, about life, about everything and nothing. It's not romantic, at least not yet. But it's the first time in years I've had a friendship with a man who doesn't see me as someone's mom, but as Helen, the woman who paints flowers and has her own opinions about politics, the weather, and the best way to make coffee. Yesterday, Arthur invited me to go with him to an exhibition at the San Antonio Art League and Museum. I accepted without consulting anyone, without asking for permission, without feeling guilty for doing something that brought me pleasure. I simply said yes, because I wanted to go. During the exhibition, while we were admiring a vibrant piece of local folk art, Arthur said something that stuck with me. You know what I like most about your art, Helen? You can tell you paint from a place of freedom, not obligation. Painting from freedom, living from freedom. For the first time in my adult life, I understand what that means. This morning, while watering the plants on my patio, the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something told me to answer. Mrs. Helen Miller? Yes, this is she. This is the Blue Star Contemporary Gallery calling. We've seen your work at the La Velita Market, and we would like to invite you to participate in a group exhibition next month. I was speechless. A real gallery, a respected one, wanted my paintings. Are you sure you're looking for me? The woman on the other end laughed kindly. Completely sure, Mrs. Miller. Your work has a very particular emotional strength. You can tell that every brushstroke comes from the soul. After hanging up, I sat in my new rocking chair, the one I bought thinking only of my own comfort, and reflected on the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I was a 65-year-old woman who defined herself solely as Ryan's mom. I had no identity of my own, no dreams of my own, no value of my own. I lived to please a son who saw me as an emotional and financial bank, married to a woman who openly despised me. Today, I am Helen Miller, an artist, an independent woman, the master of my own life and my own decisions. I have friends who value me, a talent I am developing, and for the first time in decades, I have hopes that don't depend on anyone else. The pain of losing the son I thought I had was devastating, but it led me to find the woman I had buried for 35 years. Ryan didn't die, but the toxic relationship we had did, and from those ashes, something much healthier was born. Two adults who respect each other and maintain clear boundaries. Some nights I still feel a nostalgia for those days when he was little, and I was the center of his world, but that nostalgia no longer hurts. I see it as part of a phase that was beautiful in its time, but had to end so we could both grow. This afternoon, as I prepared dinner for one without feeling sorry for myself, I thought of all the women who, like me, live for others and forget to live for themselves. Women who give so much of themselves that in the end, they don't know who they are when they're left alone. Women who confuse love with sacrifice, who think that being good mothers means disappearing as individuals. If my story were to reach any of those women, I would want them to know that it's never too late to be reborn, that the love you give without receiving respect in return isn't love, it's self-destruction, that the children who truly love us don't want to see us suffer for them, and that sometimes the greatest demonstration of love for our children is to teach them that we have boundaries, that we have value, and that we deserve to be treated with dignity. As I write these lines in my journal, looking out at my garden full of flowers that I planted by myself, for myself, I wonder, isn't it time you stopped giving so much of yourself without getting anything in return? How much longer will you wait to put your own well-being first? If this story sounds familiar, tell me in the comments if you've also been through something similar, or if you know someone who needs to hear these words. And if this story touched your heart, I ask you to leave a like and subscribe, so this message can reach more people who need to know that their value doesn't depend on how much they give, but on how much they value themselves. Because we all deserve to be reborn, and it is never, ever too late to start.